For this module, I'm going to show you how to make a Mandarin collar. And there's kind of two collar stands that we can create for the Mandarin collar. But you're going to need some numbers first. The first number you need is this measurement right here. So I'm looking at my bodice back, and you need this measurement right here. On the front, you need this measurement. So you need the back neckline and the front neckline, and those need to be kept separate. Mine were about 2 1/4 on the front, and it was about 1 1/2 on the back. But if I made a collar for the half size, it would be really titchy small, and it would be hard for you to really get the idea. So I'm going to make this collar at full size. So the numbers that I am going to use for the back are just whatever I measured on my half size doubled. So my back measurement will be 3, and my front measurement will be 4 1/2. And what you need to do to start out this collar is just draw a nice long straight line. And over on one side of it, we're going to make a mark. And this mark right here represents your center back. So I am just going to put a little CB next to it so that I know that this is my center back. The next measurement that I make is going to be my back neckline measurement. So it's going to be 3 inches. And I'm just going to make a little mark right there. My next measurement is 4 1/2. Now there's multiple ways to make a Mandarin collar. There's one where there's no shape to the neckline at all. And for that, really all I would have to do is draw the height that I would want my collar to be. So I could draw it like this, and I could draw it down and have a nice little curve, and everything would be beautiful. And it would stand up straight from the neck. It wouldn't hug the neck at all. It would stand up straight from the neck. So if you wanted to do a Mandarin collar that just stands straight up, that's how you'd go about it. However, I'm going to make one for that you're going to do that will actually wrap and hold the neck a little bit more. And this will also be the base of if you have a collar attached to this collar stand. So this is going to be the base of a collar stand, like if you were making a button-down shirt or button-up shirt. This is the base collar stand pattern that you could make. So the first thing that I'm going to do is out here where I have this little mark, this is basically my center front right now. Once you have a button down, it'll extend a little bit beyond the center front to include the button band. But because we're just going to make this as it's a Mandarin collar, there's not going to be any overlap. So this mark right here is my center front. Coming directly up from center front, I'm just going to draw a line that's 1/2 inch up. Oftentimes, if you were to snag a pattern from something else, this might be a little bit more than 1/2 inch, but 1/2 inch is a really good starting spot when you're creating a collar. What we're going to do now is we're going to take the 1 on my ruler, my 0 point, and line it up with my shoulder seam. That's what this mark halfway through is. Not quite halfway through, it's a little bit more than that. But we're going to mark that at the 0 point and pivot the ruler up until 4 1/2, which is my front neckline measurement, hits that 1/2 inch line. And we're going to fill that in with a straight line. Now I'm just going to make that nice and curved by grabbing the form of a curve, and we'll just make it nice and gentle. And I can erase the rest of this and any other little development lines so that they don't get confusing. So now I have a line that curves up by 1/2 inch, and it starts curving up at the shoulder seam. At this point, I get to determine how tall my collar is going to be. I'm going to make mine 1 1/4 inch. So I'm just going to draw a line that is parallel at 1 1/4 inch. You could, if you wanted to, kind of take this down to more like an inch before it curves down, so that it would get narrower and narrower as it got to the front. That is a possibility. Your other option is just to keep it 1.25 inches all the way through the entire thing. Keep a nice tall neckline on the front. Now all we need to do is blend into the center front. So this point here is my center front now. Not the point 1/2 inch down. And I'm going to take a line and square it up from center front. Like that. I didn't go all the way, it's just a very short line. It only needs to be 90 degrees for about 1/4 to 1/2 inch in this case. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some curves. And I'm using just some circle curves that I have on hand. If you don't have something like this, that's totally fine, not a big issue. But I'm going to use a circle curve to help form the shape. And there you go. This is a Mandarin collar that's going to hug the neck a little bit more. This would be sufficient. First, we do need to add our seam allowances, but this would be sufficient as a collar to just have it be done. But actually, before I add this, so go ahead and make one of these. And then let's show how to make the collar. So let's assume that my button band extends. So for the assignment, make one of these and put it aside. And then make another one of these for the collar. So I'm going to assume that at the center front, I've got a whole bunch of buttons that sit right at center front. My button band is going to extend 1/2 inch beyond this. So even though this mark currently is my center front, it will always be my center front, but I'm going to extend the line that's coming up a little bit farther. And by a little bit farther, I mean exactly 1/2 inch. And this might change depending on how big you decide to make your button band for like a button-down shirt. Now I'm also going to do the same thing with this line up here. And I'm going to redo that curve. I might make that curve, trying to decide which curve I like the look of the best. I like this one. So now it just extends a little bit beyond center front, but finishes all of that edge. So I've got my center front, my center back, my shoulder seam. Make sure that this is a nice notch. Now all we need to do is finish our seam allowance and go about making the collar that gets attached to this collar stand. And all of this is going to be 1/4 inch seam allowances. And this is at full size, so this is what your seam allowance really would need to be for a collared shirt. If you want to maintain the label for center front, you certainly can. I'm going to leave a notch there for sure to indicate that this is my center front. And then the other thing that you can do is put this on a fold if you want. You can fold your paper in half and copy and trace it over to the other side so that you don't have to place the collar on a fold, but it's totally fine, at least before you digitize it, to have it in this form. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab another sheet of paper. And for the sake of this, I'm going to use some tracing paper so that you can kind of see through a little bit better. So I have some tracing paper, and usually I would not use tracing paper. The only reason I'm using this tracing paper is so that it's more visible on the camera so you can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to take my tracing paper and I am going to trace the center back as well as the top line to center front. So you're going to want to come in here and actually extend your center front up here to this top line so you know where it is. So you're going to trace this entire top line and center back over until you hit the center front line. And then back that off 1/8 of an inch. So we want it to basically go to the center front line, but back it off 1/8 of an inch so that when it gets constructed, they're not gonna fight with each other. This is the beginning of our collar stand. So we're looking at the outside collar right now. This is the right side of the fabric going away from the body. And right now, by putting this on top, I'm going to develop the outer collar as well. So this is the part of the collar that everyone sees. And I like to have a tracing paper, just be able to see through it, so I can decide how tall I want my collar. And I don't want it to be the exact same height as my collar stand. If anything, I'd like it to be at least 1/8 of an inch longer, taller, because then it can cover up that seam. So I'm going to make mine 1.5 inches tall. Once I have this top line done, I'm going to go ahead and make some other notches on here as well, probably about 1 inch away from center back. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the collar so that I have a notch for later. And before I take it away, I've decided I wanted 1.25 inches here, but I also get to decide the shape of my collar. So, and by the shape of my collar, I mean the shape of the point. So I know I wanted 1.5 inches tall, so it's going to follow this line. At the shoulder seam, I can start doing something different with it. I can come down and make it really, really, really pointy like this, or pointy like this, or I can even have it come back here. If you come out to here, you're going to have a point that goes basically pretty close to this your button line, and it's just gonna be really pointy and come really far over. This is going to be basically come straight down a little bit back from the button band, and this line will be like a cutaway collar. So the farther back away you go, the more cutaway collar it is. The further forward you come, the further the point extends towards the button band. You could even, if you wanted to, do crazy shapes. If you wanted to. I'm not going to do crazy shapes on mine. I'm going to do a cutaway collar. So I'm going to erase the rest of this, and I'm going to finish out my collar. So it's going to be the same all the way. It's going to be 1.5 inches down from the top line all the way over to the shoulder. And then at the shoulder, it can start doing something different, and I wanted that cutaway. So I'm going to have it come back probably about that angle. I don't want it to be 1.5 inches here. I think I want it to be 1 3/4 inches here. So it gets a little bit more dramatic. Now, we'll make it 2 inches. So from this point, I get to blend back to the shoulder. Which actually ended up being a straight line for me. So here is my collar. Here's my collar stand. Now all I need to do is label this. This is center back, and this can also be on a fold. I've got this notch matching up here, so people aren't going to accidentally consider the bottom of my collar the part that gets attached to the collar stand. Go ahead and add my seam allowances in, which are going to be 1/4 inch on this. When you turn this in, you don't have to turn it in on tracing paper. If you want to use tracing paper so it's easier for you to create the collar, that's totally fine. But this piece and this piece now go together. Go ahead and cut them out. Make sure that you remember your labels. So this would be whatever style number I want. It would also be just whatever style name I want. The name of this piece would be a collar. Size 8. I need 2 of them because I need an outer collar and I need an inner collar. There's got to be some way to finish this edge. And I'll make this number 1 for this little pattern set. This right here, same style number, same style name. This is a collar stand. When you're labeling it for when it stopped at center front, that's when it would be called just Mandarin collar or something like that. But this is also a size 8. I also need 2 of this because it's going to enclose all edges. This will be my number 2. Make sure you say what kind it is. So this is 2 self, and this is also 2 self. But I'm actually going to change that up right now as I'm thinking about it. I want one of these to be 1 self, and then I want one to be self, but I want it to be block fused. And what that means is that the fabric will have interfacing attached to it, so that one of them is a little bit thicker. So this is a 1 self and a 1 self block fused. Interfacing is really important. So now as we're doing finishing pieces like collars, it's important to remember that you're going to interface some of them. So this is a regular collar stand and how you would make the collar for it as well.